of MMO. Of course, that being these very open, sandboxy games, and most recently I just covered Worlds Adrift, and I'm planning to cover a whole lot more because there's a ton on Kickstarter, so thanks so much for the donations of Patreons for allowing me to afford to buy into these games. I'm looking forward to Crowfall and a number of others, but I'm playing these games, I'm looking at these games, and I've been kind of digesting this idea for a little bit here, and I think now, I finally got the words to spit out here. Of course, I'm not scripted, peer-to-peer, eye-to-eye guys, we're just all friends and family here, and as MMO players yourselves, or, you at least play online games, I bet you can kind of relate to this. So here, let's bring it down a notch, okay? Let's calm it down, and let's just kind of reference one thing that I think a lot of you guys love referencing, and in any sort of forum post about MMOs, everyone loves saying this: Guild Wars 1, whether you agree it is an MMO or not, which I don't, it definitely can feel more social than most modern MMOs. Games like Monster Hunter, games like Warframe, these games somehow have you playing with more people more consistently and actually, working together in some cases. Warframe, you can just run through it, but I'm just saying, you can actually dialogue with people in these games when they're not really designed as massively multiplayer games. They're partied, they're lobbied, you play with like 4 people at max, maybe there's a hub town or something, but you don't really have that massive combat, massive gameplay, and yet those games are the ones that, more often than not, in terms of the number of those games and the number of experiences you have in those games versus normal MMOs, it feels more social in those games. They're small games. In fact, a lot of them generally start out as micro games, the opposite of massive. Like Warframe, started out as small as possible, and now look at it. We're getting open world, and we have trading, and we're getting like all this guild functionality. There's so much social stuff going on, and there's so much player interaction. Actually, there's a lot of potential for Warframe still too. But I think that MMOs in general should be like that. And you do have some that are a little bit more special. You do have the guild and hardcore rating of like Final Fantasy XIV and World of Warcraft. And then you have the true theme parkiness of Guild Wars 2, where everyone is just so fluidly doing all sorts of different crazy things, circulating through different parts of the game, running to world versus world, going and jumping literally into jumping puzzles, seasonal events, the single player, maybe bring in a co-op friend, and then jumping back into the open world, do a world boss or something. There's just really good circulation of players and a lot of social stuffs just kind of happening organically inside of Guild Wars 2, and then all these other MMOs, even a pseudo sandbox game like Black Desert Online. It's really a sandbox game, just hyper compartmentalized. And that's kind of the point I want to make, is that the newest and most modern, hip and hoppin' sandbox MMO, which is this new generation of MMO that we're seeing a lot. That's the new trend right now. From the New World all the way, to Ashes of Creation. A lot of sandbox MMOs coming out, but the one that's really kicking everyone in the balls here is Black Desert Online. We love it or hate it, it's the one that you keep coming back to. It's the one that it's got you, it sunk its teeth into you. Maybe some people have gone away, but like me. But I'm just saying, I had a good time with it. It was a fun game, and it's kind of like this theme park concept or design in a way, but it is a sandbox MMO. Like, I think technically, though some people don't call it sandbox because you can't like craft or anything really, but regardless, it's an open world MMO that has these very specific things you do at very specific times, and it funnels players through it. And then it incentivizes you creating new characters and, recirculating through the game. And that sort of gameplay loop, which to many people is heinous and grindy as hell, that's true, but it also keeps the game really freaking healthy. Not in terms of just monetization, which it does, oh my god, but no, really, it keeps people, re-churning through the game. Warframe is the same way, Path of Exile is the same way. Hey, wait a second. Realm of the Mad God? Wait, all these extremely popular games make use of this mechanic. It's almost like having players, actually populating every inch of your game is like important or something in an online only game. Huh, that's weird. So that's kind of the point I'm talking about, is that these games, ranging from non-MMOs technically, these partied lobbied games, all the way to the popular MMOs that focus on very low numbers, like raids and dungeons, or Black Desert Online is basically a solo game in some cases. These games that make the gameplay fun without having lots of players are actually the ones that feel the most massive. So have you ever gone to PlanetSide 2 on off-peak hours? It's basically non-gameplay. Have you ever tried to play Darkfall? Basically non-gameplay. Have you played any of these Kickstarter games, these new MMOs, and you didn't try to join a guild? I know my experience with Albion Online felt pretty fucking bad. So there's a lot of these newer games, these big open games that are trying to just kind of create this giant canvas for players to paint their own, awesome epic stories, but they're not giving us any bullet points. And that's what we need as players. Actually, limitations create creativity. In all cases. So these designers, I guess, they just feel like they can create these really unique gimmicks. So Worlds Adrift, the most interesting game that I recently played it. I really liked it. My first look was fun. I made it an hour long even, but like, it wasn't like the trailer showed. I debate even if it is an actual MMO, like, Sea of Thieves kind of feeling. And it's cool, like grappling hooks and the physics-based gameplay, and it's a tactical action combat MMO. And I plan, I guess, to put it in some top 10s in the future, like action combat MMO, but it was empty. I didn't really have a purpose. I didn't really feel that action combat. I didn't get to see PvP in the first 3 hours. I didn't get to do much of anything, at least instantaneously. And I kind of drifted around for a little bit, really looking for players. It didn't strike out to me. And that's the problem, is a lot of these sandbox games, from Life is Feudal, Mortal Online, I could just go on and on and on, Gloria Victis, exactly. All these games have really generally poor first impressions, like first few hours, but then there's always this ebb and flow. Like, okay, yeah, maybe somebody somewhere on YouTube had this epic guild fight, guild versus guild, 100 versus 100, they raised a town or whatever, but maybe that was like 0.01% of their gameplay time. Like, that was the only cool thing that's ever happened in that game ever. And I'm seeing this happen with a lot of games, where unless you're some giant YouTuber who can easily like make a guild or join a guild and, do all sorts of epic stuff, the average player, on average, is not getting near 100% of the potential of these games. And so critics are going to do videos on these games, or just first looks, and streamers are going to stream the games, and it's going to kind of look biased. They're going to be like, oh man, you do this and that and that. And it's like, it's so cool, man. Like, this game technically, its code is technically really freaking interesting. But the thing is players are the majority of the content. So it can have the craziest action combat, but if I never run into another player, then it doesn't matter, ever. Unless it has some crazy PvE, and then at that point, you should just do what Final Fantasy XIV or World of Warcraft does and focus on the dungeons. And then, yeah, you funnel players through that, and, the game stays alive. So some people complain about this, actually, in a lot of MMOs, that MMOs shift and change direction, or they become more care bearer and hand-holding and antisocial. But I would argue, actually, that the grand, macro meta of the game becomes way more competitive, way more serious, and much more social. Especially, like, when you join a Discord, join a guild, and you get into the hardcore raiding of something like World of Warcraft, that is a whole new experience that can last throughout the years. Open world PvP in World of Warcraft would have never have continued and survived. It just wouldn't have. They now have to literally make a whole new expansion just to get people re-excited about that. And then they have to refunnel some design so that there's more open dungeons and just, basically funnel players each expansion into new experiences, because that's what MMOs are. I've said it over and over again, but these online games are real time. They are events, they are festivals. And, at different times, different stages, things are going to change. The communities are going to change. There's an ebb and flow of players in the game, out of the game, doing different stuff, circulating all through it. And I think the new wave of MMOs, and many that have passed and failed, were just a little bit too big for their britches. Technically, they weren't bad games. And every time I talk about these games that have 0 players now, like, I don't know, Fallen Earth or Anarchy Online, and a few other like sci-fi MMO especially, that were open world, right? They failed, and people said, oh no, it was a good game. You know what, dudes? It could have been the best game. I know everyone loves Star Wars Galaxies apparently, but here's the thing, guys. No players means it's not an MMO. It's a non-game. It is a non-functioning game. And even if it does have some players, you say, 100 players is fine, 1,000 players is fine. For a giant open world game where every inch and every experience is completely dependent on players, my dudes, you need those players, or else you're not getting 100% of the game 100% of the time. And even then, I really don't think that you're getting even half of the game proper. You're not playing the game, it's not going to look like the trailers, it's not going to be the experience you're promised on the back of the box. These games are designed way too big, way too large. Nobody's really going to be able to understand what to do in the game, how to go about it, and, players fragment. One player drops off, another player drops off, and then the snowball continues. The game gets smaller and smaller, and once the hype is dead, it is dead. You don't come back from that unless you restructure, which is why expansive MMOs continue to live. Theme park MMOs are the way to go. Even if they don't last that long, you just jump in, jump out, you get your 100%, you get what was worth it. And these sandbox MMOs that are supposed to be the longest running, the player-driven, the most creative, or open, they're not. They feel the most closed, they feel the most isolating, and actually, they generally fail quite freaking rapidly. So, is it the fault of the developers? To an extent, yeah. They could have like the coolest graphics, coolest mechanics, coolest ideas, but it doesn't matter if the designers are too lazy to give us the bullet points so that we from there can write our own story. So far, it just feels like they're just throwing up a blank canvas, right? That's it. And they're splatting some paint here and there, it's trying to entice us. And it does sometimes, but it's nowhere near enough to paint a full and beautiful picture of what an MMO really, really can be. So, yeah, designers, you need players, but you gotta give us fuel for the fire. That's what I'm saying. The MMOs are too big. Scale them down, make more intricate stuff in your maps, Easter eggs, things like that. Curate our experience, you know? I'm not saying make it a full line, but maybe instead of a circular or, just an open, vast area, let us spiral around like BDO. Give us some direction, give us some purpose, and then from there, I promise we will surprise you. But just giving us a blank canvas, that's not enough. You're not really designing a game. You're not designing an MMO, at least. You're throwing up some code, some combat mechanics, some stuff you're emulating from other games that you don't understand why they succeeded, when they succeeded. You're not really understanding what it means to really design an MMO experience. It's not just a game, it's a real-time event. It's a festival.